from the top of West Mountain in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Good morning, everybody. This is 94.3 FM, The Talker. This is Sanity Check, Libertarian Lou, Tea Party Mike. Number here is 888-577-4487 if you want to join in on the conversation. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Lou. You know, I understand you've got a special guest again today.
We did. Frank Sorick is in studio with us. We'll be joined by X. And for that matter, anybody else that wants to call in and just blow off a little steam and just start their weekend off right. This week, Michael, as you know, we want to just reminisce a little bit. And we encourage people to call in about any of our issues. We're going to be touching on all kinds of issues, but certainly we're going to concentrate on our court reform stuff that we've been doing in Lackawanna County and Luzerne County and the family court, so you could feel free to call in about that. But also we wanted to talk about our launch of the Indiegogo funding for some of our campaigns that we're doing here, the launch of the Pocono paper. We want to expand, and that was one of the reasons we have Mr. Sorick in here, because he was right there, right from the beginning, Frank, and obviously you're our lead investigative reporter. But
That's
we have
a scary thought, isn't it?
It is, and I was laughing, Michael, as I was listening to the promo here or the for Sanity Check coming on, that we're responsible for the sole content of this program. So
that's an even scarier thought.
A very scary thought. But the whole idea of this is, Michael, today is we want to go back because what happened and how we started the paper and why we started the paper, we've talked about here, but certainly with this new launch, and certainly we don't want this to be a begathon today, as I mentioned, but at the same token, that's the way we grow, and that's how. We want people to see the value in what we've been able to do with the Independent Gazette at 94.3 with the Talker here and Sanity Check, and how we've been able to make a real influence. What really happened in Wilkes-Barre, Frank, right, and Michael, and how we could also do the same here in Lackawanna County once we go into the Poconos, Trenton for sure. We're still down there. The mayor.
What has happened in Wilkes-Barre for the listeners just joining us who may not be aware? For those of you out there, who have been living under a rock, haven't been reading any of the three Wilkes-Barre newspapers, who might just be waking up this morning and saying, "Gee, what are they talking about?"
Thank you, Frank.
Wilkes-Barre City is now under federal investigation. For those of you who didn't know,
right, and that's why we want to give hope.
Frank's wearing a bulletproof vest right now, right?
That's why I'm hiding in Scranton.
Under a rock.
Under a rock on the top of West Mountain.
And folks, feel free to call it. It's 888-577-4487, 888-577-4487. And we're going to touch on a lot of the subjects, really. We were looking through the papers here just before we started, Michael, and I got to tell you, it was fun.
It was. And it all started because we were frustrated. Lou was frustrated, couldn't get any of the messages out in the current media, and you kept saying, Lou, own the media, own the message, and that's so true. From our very first edition, New Sheriffs in Town, we kicked off the Independent Gazette at the same time the Wilkes-Barre City Taxpayers Association began their investigation of City Hall.
And that was July 20?
July of 2012.
Wow.
And not a very long time. I mean, we're only going back just less than 2 years.
Right.
And in less than 2 years, we've toppled a regime. We've put them under federal investigation. And FBI target letters were issued just this week. So many in the city received their target letters. If you haven't gotten one, folks, trust me, they're on the way.
Think about that, Michael. It is encouraging. It really is. And the whole leg towing. We know where it started. We know it started with, really, Mark Robbins.
It definitely
And what
did.
issue was that, Frank? I mean, we go back a couple issues here.
It actually started, I mean, Mark Robbins held before we didn't cover his very first event because the Gazette wasn't there yet. And that was prior to our July issue of 2012. It was the beginning of summer. It was like, I want to say April or June of 2012. He held his rally on on the square there.
We were there for that one, and I was at his first court appearance.
Okay.
And that kind of kicked that off. But what I was saying was, I think it was like 4 or 5 issues later where Mark got arrested.
He did.
And what was the headlines of that? Michael, remember this one? What was and he's holding our press pass.
Right. This one, Mark Robbins was actually taking photos of lag loaner vehicles behind the Wilkes-Barre Police Department, covering a story for the Independent Gazette. And I still think the Gazette should have sued City Hall and sued the police department for blowing our investigative piece. I mean, our reporter on the scene, and what do? They go out and broadcast over ComCenter that they've arrested Mark Robbins, taking photos behind the police station, alerting other members of the press to come and scoop us on that story. We had the exclusive, and because they arrested our reporter, then right away we're out-scooped by local news media. So,
and once again, going back to the whole premise of this is, whether it's here, whether it's in Scranton, whether it's in the Poconos, certainly in Wilkes-Barre, the little towns, we know that the corruption and the nepotism and the cronyism is running wild.
It's everywhere. It's not just in Wilkes-Barre. We pick on Wilkes-Barre an awful lot, but it is everywhere. Anytime you have a system of government like we have, where the people in power have learned how to gift themselves our money, whether it be free gas or using their credit cards for travel, or going on a legitimate business trip and not staying in the Motel 6, but choosing instead the Hilton. You know, I mean, if you're in private business and you're on a junket for your company, they're going to book your hotel. And trust me, you're going to be at the Motel 6.
Or exactly.
You know, you're not going to be at the Hilton. And these public officials are always opting to stay at the grand hotels and never the inexpensive $50 a night ones.
Mike, and getting back to this whole, I guess, giving people hope, and this is really where we can make positive change, and that's the whole idea of not only how we're trying to expand, and certainly if you're part of our newsletter and you probably got something in the early morning email this morning that we launched our Indiegogo drive to help expand in Wilkes-Barre. Right. What we really want to do is put those boxes up, and all those things cost money, Mike, right. and sometimes what it says, if you don't ask, you will not receive. So this is all part of it, is how do we expand and how do we make this influence happen even more so? We said right from the start this was a long-term project, right. 2014, 2016, and the paper has brought a lot of different people together. Frank, you and me were adversaries.
We absolutely were.
And you were a good adversary, I must say. That was. And for folks going back a little bit, I was helping Betsy Summers run her mayoral campaign, and Frank was helping
Lisa Cope run hers.
That's right. And boy, were we going at each other's throats there for a while, especially you and me. We really had some great jabs going on.
The end of it all, Lou, was that we both wanted the same thing. We both wanted a positive outcome for Wilkes-Barre. We were fighting each other on that. And the premise that the enemy of our enemy becomes our friend. And that's where we went with that. I mean, we both realized at the end of the day that fighting each other, two honest people going at it, when instead we should have turned our efforts to the corrupt government, which we eventually did.
And talking about elections, Michael, this election cycle coming up in 2014, and certainly one of the reasons why we want to continue to expand and give people a voice is that there are many people, Frank, and Michael, that are running unopposed, and we are going to make sure that does not happen.
Right.
We got Pashinsky running unopposed. We have Udicek running unopposed. We have Baker running unopposed. Quite a few others, too.
Right.
And that's where we're going to make real change. And the real change comes, Mike, also is allowing independents now, because that's all we have. Right. That can get on the ballot is independents, whether they're part of a party or just straight independent. We're giving them a platform to get that message out.
Exactly. And whether you're a Democrat or Republican, it doesn't matter. I mean, when we're talking about people who actually want to make the change. And for Eddie Day's, Paszynski's district, that is a highly Democratic district, and the Republicans haven't put anyone up. So in that area, I am urging people to write in Betsy Summers, the Libertarian candidate, as a Republican so that she can secure the Republican nomination in the May primary. That way, we will guarantee a victory for Betsy Summers. The Republicans will have a reason to vote for her. She'll be running as a Republican, and all of the independents behind her, along with the endorsements that she's currently carrying as a Real Reform 76 candidate who will support House Bill 76 when Betsy Summers is elected. So,
and that's certainly one of your main issues. You want to see the property tax
eliminated in Pennsylvania, and as president of the Taxpayers Association, that's what I've been pushing for, is Real Reform 76, so that, and of course Betsy has pledged to support that, so of course I endorse Betsy as president of the taxpayers. But more importantly than those city endorsement that she's picking up, she's also picking up the statewide PTCC endorsement as well. So that's the Pennsylvania Taxpayer Cyber Coalition is fully behind Betsy.
And some of those other issues, too, Mike, is certainly, I know she's looking at court reform, perhaps putting cameras in the courtrooms, and we need legislators. That's where that's going to change, and we're certainly going to touch that throughout the subject, is how do we make those changes? And going back, once again, to why we did what we did and why we started this, Michael. I mean, I'm looking at some of the old papers. Remember Baloney-gate?
Oh, Baloney-gate is in here. Who could forget Baloney-gate? You know, for those of you who don't know, that was Luzerne County's prison system giving away free Fruit Basket Fridays. You know, you just order whatever you want. It didn't matter whether it was on the menu. You could take home shrimp, lobster, caviar. Didn't matter. You just order what you want.
And, Michael, the headlines of that paper was council initiates lag investigation.
Right.
And why are we talking about lag? Why? Certainly folks I know that are listening even around the country at this point, because we know that this is really, the show is really expanding in a way that we never thought would happen, Michael, and certainly the people reading our newspapers. So how does lag really, how does that impact what folks are listening about? And for us, it was because people like Mark Robbins, because we were the ones that were out throwing these newspapers on people's doorsteps. All of a sudden, folks started coming forward, more people, and it was the constant staying in front of
a lot of what we've seen is folks have always had a story to tell. They didn't have a source to get it out to. And I know folks are thinking, well, there's two other newspapers in Wilkes-Barre. Why didn't they have that source? And right away, folks were afraid to talk to those newspapers because far too often you would hear reporters either blowing their cover, putting their name in the paper when they didn't want to be identified, or calling up the mayor and saying, hey, Lou Jasikoff lodged a complaint against you with our paper. So what do you have to say about that? And then right away, now Lou's being tailed by Wilkes-Barre City Police.
Michael, you remember when we brought this up before, when the paper first hit the ground? We were visited. we were visited by Mayor Layton and the code enforcement. It was like 4 hours or 2 hours after the paper actually came out. Right. And the next thing we know, we had people knocking on the door.
Do you have your inspections?
Yeah, where's your inspections?
Where's your printing press? We're here to shut it down.
So But getting back to what we're talking about here is how does the paper, how does something small as what we've had and certainly growing, how has that been able to influence what's happening in people's communities? And that's why I want to keep going back to this lag towing, because now, Frank, and that's one of the reasons, that is really why these indictments are coming down.
It is simply because there has been a problem for a long time, and it's not just a guy charging whatever he wanted, or officers saying, well, maybe this vehicle should be towed, maybe it shouldn't. But at any rate, we're going to make a decision that any questionable whatever, we're going to tow it for whatever reason. I mean, I heard
a predatory towing company basically in Wilkes-Barre,
where it was encouraged by the
administration and the police department, and certainly You had the chief of police selling cars. Right. I mean, he had a license. That was something else that we brought up. And once again, by us staying on top of this,
right,
we've been able to put the pressure on the other media because, Frank, they don't want to be scooped any more
no, and
especially not by us.
Especially not by, a monthly newspaper that they've had on their, reporters' desks for a full month and have done nothing with it, and the dailies haven't covered it, and then here we come a month later and are covering the story. Right, that really makes them look bad.
And Michael, I want to get you in on this stuff here. So what's happened is that we want to give that encouragement to people in Scranton and the Poconos, and certainly we're going to be looking at San Antonio and Arlington, Virginia, in Trenton, New Jersey, is that we can make a difference. And is that not what we're in this whole thing for? I mean, we've said right from the beginning, nothing changes. Nothing changes until you have a free and independent press and free and equal elections, because so much of this is intertwined.
Well, it really is. And, I even look at the current issues with the custody for cash. And what did I ask you yesterday? Has any of the other media started to report on this yet?
Nope.
And the answer is no. And why is that? I mean, this is a very, if I'm a reporter and I'm looking to get noticed and I want to do the best job I can, I'm looking for the hard-hitting story. And yet it's been really repelled from the other sources. And my question to them is maybe we're reporting on the wrong people. Maybe we should be reporting on the other news sources. because I think this is completely irresponsible reporting, Lou, and it really, really, I think, supports the fact that a lot of this media is bought and paid for, Lou, and what gets out is told by whoever's pulling the strings. So I think this is why, and not just, Independent Gazette, but any independent news source is vitally important for the security of our nation when it comes right down to it.
We're going to take a break, Mike, and when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about why is the media not reporting on the custody for cash and other stories for that matter.
Has the political class let you down? Then join Sanity Check as they expose, inform, and enlighten through the new standard in talk radio. Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM, The Talker.
Hey! The screams are sounding all the same.
Don't listen.
94.3 FM, The Talker. This is Sanity Check. We are back. 888-577-4487. 888-577-4487. This segment, Mr. X will be joining us, and he is on the line. But, Michael, just listening to the commercials, we're talking about why hasn't the media reported on certainly the custody for cash stuff. Why have they not talked more about perhaps the water cure? Bob Butts has been fighting all that, and certainly it seems as though very, very often it comes down to corporate interests. 90% of our media is owned by 6 corporations, and the beat goes on. Good morning, X.
Good morning, gentlemen.
So,
it's interesting you're talking about cash for kids. I wonder out over in the Ukraine or in Russia, is their court system better than ours if it pertains to comparisons with Northeast Pennsylvania?
Well, that's a good question. Certainly, we've been following. The Gazette has been following a number of cases, and we're going to touch on some of them today because some of them are really heart-wrenching. This past Wednesday, John DiLiberto and myself spent well over 12 hours just videotaping people's stories, people that have come forward here and talked about things. And yesterday wound up spending more time in the courtrooms following a case that we were asked to look at. And once we started just showing up in the courtrooms, you see the guardian ad litem and the lawyer and the judge recused themselves, and lo and behold, yesterday the woman shows up with a lawyer, and the next thing you know, things are going in her favor. In fact, I overheard the judge say, "Well, congratulations, you have you got yourself representation." And I was thinking, boy, is this weird? This is what you should be congratulating yourself on, or should we be out looking for what the truth really is? Certainly, as we look at even that case itself. I sat in that courtroom, and once the players got there, all the lawyer, the guardian ad litem, the opposing lawyer, all of a sudden, the lawyer for children and youth asked for a private meeting with the judge, and there they go. They all go off into chambers for half an hour while this woman sat at the table there, and the players decided her fate. Her faith, or fate, yes, and I just wondered if this is why do we need to have cameras in the courtroom?
Well, and this is again another example of the fact that we have a bias that we somehow view whatever we do for the most part as good, and what foreigners do as bad. So, as we sit here and we're doing comparisons, how do you know that the court system in Russia, the court system in the Ukraine, isn't better than ours? And the reason being is if you asked 100 people on the street, we would just naturally assume it, unless, of course, maybe you're one of the people that's actually gone before a couple of these crazy courts, and then you start to question the entire system. And the system always is designed to do one thing, and that is to make you always believe that your system or your way of doing things is the best and is above reproach. Well, clearly from your examples of what you've seen, you might be better off going to court in Venezuela over your child.
I know we're laughing here, X, but it's but it's not a laughing matter. And the fact of the matter is, and we've pointed this out before too, when we just look at the whole judicial system and our justice system here, what do we have? 3 or 4% of the world population and 25% of the prison population. Has this just become a way of a cottage industry? I mean, really.
Well, there's the military-industrial complex, and now there's the prison complex. You've got corporations that now own prisons through private contracts, telling states and localities that, look, unless our prison's full, we're going to charge you for the unused beds. So now there's an incentive to throw more people in prison to at least justify the cost of what you're doing. And this is pervasive within our system that, hopefully most Americans don't have to find their way into a courtroom. I mean, I think it was Abraham Lincoln that, made some sort of quote, avoid courts and lawyers at all costs. We're back to this position of let's always remember that the integrity of the laws that we pass is also based upon how well the courts go about enforcing those particular laws. And that's the scary part about what we have. We've got a rogue judiciary. We've got a rogue legislative branch that pass laws that they really have no intention of enforcing, or if they're enforced in an uneven manner. If you just take the amount of prosecutions of minorities under the current drug laws relative to, let's say, people who are richer socioeconomically, it's drastically different. And this is one of those areas where, Republicans and Democrats alike have let down those who are the less trodden within our society, because it's a lot easier to throw the book at the lower class person than it is to throw them at the, well, he's from a good home, or, well, his father's a good guy, So that's really the scary part. We always rely on justice and the true concept of justice, of it being doled out in an equal and level fashion so that everyone feels that they've gotten a fair treatment. But, obviously when you listen to a number of these court cases and you see how much one person gets sentenced to jail time compared to for the exact same crime as maybe someone else, then you start to say to yourself, something's wrong here.
And are we buying our justice? And, Michael, this is one of the reasons, and Frank, why I want to keep going back to lag. Because when we first started reporting on lag towing, when Mark Robbins first started talking about it, what were they saying? We were nuts. We were crazy. Right. And just to go back to that, here was an individual, and certainly for those people that might not understand or have been following us all this time, and how I want to try to tie this into the custody for cash stuff, nobody was really reporting on this. And what happened was, here was an individual that had his car towed. And then when he went to pick up the car, I think it was, Frank, a $250 fine or whatever it was. For 2 hours to get the car towed. Then as he's driving the car out of the tow lot, the car's juggling all around. The tie rods were bent. He had a nice car. Right. And then what set him off, here was an individual, which we are glad that he's written for us and we've worked together, and he's certainly supported what we've done. Here was an individual now that made the mistake of calling the police and saying, hey, wait a minute, my car just got towed and now it's rumbling and damaging. And then he took a whooping, not physical whooping, but a verbal whooping from the police. And all of a sudden he started saying, Michael, hey, if they're treating me like this, what are they doing to folks that are maybe don't have the means to fight it?
There was a common misconception with lag, and this is the same thing in the custody for cash, I suspect. The common misconception is police don't just arbitrarily tow your vehicle. You must have done something wrong. So lag was justified and vindicated many times in the public by saying, well, he's only towing the scumbags. And the same thing with this custody for cash. I mean, come on, Lou. The courts aren't removing custody from good, honest citizens who are doing the best they can for their children. We're removing children from the homes of those that would harm a child or those, scumbags that don't deserve to have their children. That's all we're doing. So, and that's how public justifies what's going on. And rather it's one case or 100 cases or 1,000 cases of good, honest people having their children removed when they should be able to see their children or have their children in their custody and care.
Or just have some sunlight shown on it.
Right.
Michael, I can say seriously that there are days now that I cannot return all the phone calls that I get in a day. Right. It has gotten to that point. And when that starts happening, you have to start questioning, wow. And we have been questioning, and that's one of the reasons why we're going to stay on this story, just like those Wolverines that stayed on the lag towing story. And I want to make sure that people have the hope that, Frank, and that's why we're here today, really, was to say, it took 2 years.
Right.
It's taken 2 years of constant vigilance. And the media, Michael, that was willing to talk about it. Mike, touch on that, and then we have some calls that I want to take.
Well, Lou, you're right. When I've known Mark Robbins for a little bit. His children went to school with my daughter. And I remember talking to Mark, and it was really not about Mark and what happened to Mark. It was what happened to Mark and how many other people is this happening to. And Mark was fortunate that he had the means to be able to fight this, but he did recognize, in fact, that most people that they were targeting, as you had said, did not have the means. So it was really a mission of the Independent Gazette to really represent those people who are unrepresentable in our society because they've been casted aside, and it's not what our Constitution tells us, Lou.
And just because we find a way to justify something, as you said, those people who are cast aside, Michael, just because we find a way to justify something doesn't make it right. And that's where the Gazette needs to keep doing what it's doing. And
growing and going back to, and once again, we're hoping that people will look at this drive, what we're doing, and certainly a good portion of that drive is to advertise, to get our, get the name out there even more so, to make sure that people could pick up these gazettes everywhere.
On every street corner.
On every street corner.
And more importantly, to know that they do have a voice, that anybody can get their message out in the Gazette. We are a free press.
I'm looking forward to this thing, Michael, and as we've been able to put this together over the last few months, the drive and the stuff that we're talking about, it'll be a good tool for us to show folks, and even if you don't have the means to get involved, what we're asking is just check it out and then maybe pass it on and let this thing percolate. We are going to take a break. We have Bruce Levine on the line. When we come back, I want him to talk a little bit about how he took this story to so many different places, why the media is not reporting perhaps on custody for cash or any other issue for that matter. We'll be right back. You're listening to Sanity Check, 888-577-4487.
The answer you're looking for lies right here.
Let those words fall out. It's not as easy.
Seems to be for me, Lou.
For you, perhaps. But when your kids and your family is held in the balance, Frank, and I know you feel for this, that sometimes it's very, very difficult to be brave, and
Right.
so often we have X and Michael on the phone, and Bruce is on the line here too, but so often folks are put in the position to where they have to weigh those two things. Can they speak out? Only because of the intimidation
Will it
factor.
make it worse?
And will it make it worse? And for those that have come out, I have to say, I give you so much credit, because I've seen the tears in this short period of time that we've been doing this. And just we're sitting here, Michael, in the studio and talking, and Frank brought something up here, is that I guess this whole idea is that we want people to just have an open mind. I mean, you were talking about the Kids for Cash, Frank.
Right.
And for how long that went on, and at the time until you said Terry
For any of you who saw the Kids for Cash movie, and some might have wondered why Terry was the focal point of that movie. I mean, she was pretty much telling the story because she was the one that told the story. If it weren't
in the press, and certainly she was
Right.
one of the reporters that we felt right from the start that we could go and share knowledge with, because that's one of the things we do too. Is we get, Frank, you get, it's enormous. It's an enormous amount of information that you get from the crime watchers, and
we can't cover it all.
We can't cover it all.
We have limited resources, sure enough, but there's some things that do need to be exposed, and I work very well with the other
News
reporters,
media.
right? And give them stories often that we just don't have the resources, time, or to get out there in the way that it needs to be exposed.
And the point to that is that because they know that if they don't cover it,
right,
we will. Therefore, they don't want to be scooped.
Right.
So with that all in mind, and certainly asking people to have an open mind that are listening to this, and don't just shut it off. Don't put those blinders on and say these things can't happen. They did happen. Right. And I want to bring Bruce Levine on. Bruce has been a local activist. Certainly, he brought the story to us originally. And one of the problems, Bruce, that you had was that you had a hard time finding people to actually report on some of the things that you were trying to get out. Good morning, Bruce.
Hey, good morning, gentlemen, and thank you. You know, the line that came up to me as you're talking here, and you had so many great points. Silence can only help the oppressor. With that said, I've been told by investigative reporters over the last few years, and even this week, we don't run a detective agency. Stop spreading undocumented and damaging rumors. These are quotes. Unsubstantiated accusations that could defame real people with real names. We don't run that. Maybe you should file your own lawsuit. I went to local print media 5 years ago, and over the last 5 years, radio, you name it, I went to them. And that's essentially what I got. Rolling of the eyeballs, escorted out of the building. We're not touching it.
Well, one of the things, Bruce, that we can document, and certainly we've been saying here for a while that we've been skirting around the edges, even though I know, you know, what people are telling us are the truth. We've been very, very careful to report on certain aspects of this. For the last couple weeks, for folks that are listening, a number of people had come to me and probably come to you, but certainly came to the Independent Gazette and said, "Hey, listen, I was told to go to get drug tests, and I was told that I had to pay cash, and I was told that the person that told me to go," and that's Brenda Coble, by the way, who is the current guardian ad litem in Lackawanna County. That and of course, speaking with her yesterday, she said everything was court ordered. But for anybody that knows anything about this whole system, the guardian ad litems, despite what that AOPC report said, the guardian ad litems very often just make the rules. And here she was telling people to go get drug tests to a company that her mother owned. And that was, even though I had that confirmed, I've had that confirmed for weeks here. I approached her yesterday in court, and, well, of course.
This is not shocking to me at all, and the listeners, regardless of the size of the audience or the makeup of the audience, need to know and discuss this with their friends and families and coworkers immediately and on a daily basis. This is not shocking. This is a woman, Brenda Coble, that I went to retain her as an attorney to fight the injustice approximately 4 years ago, paid her a retainer. And in a few days, she came back to me basically and said, sorry, we can't help you. We have to follow what Danielle Ross. To clarify, Brenda Coble is a guardian ad litem. She's a part-time guardian ad litem. She's an attorney. She apparently crafted with Chester Harhut, Judge Chester Harhut, the guardian ad litem system, which put Danielle Ross in place as the sole guardian ad litem. She told me, we can't help you. I'm sorry, we can't help you. At which point, I got my money back, said thank you, and we moved on.
And to get back to this, and once again, I mean, what is the press supposed to be? What are we supposed to be? Are we not supposed to be the investigative journalists?
We are supposed to be somewhat of a detective agency. I mean, the whole title of investigative reporter, if you're not investigating, you're just waiting for the stories to fall in your lap, then, you know, why
the muckrakers.
Yeah. What happened there? Like, I don't understand how they could say to you, Bruce, that we don't run a detective agency. That's exactly what they should be running.
And her mother.
Not only, to your point, if I may, specifically, one of these people is, and the name will come out. The name will come out, but it's not relevant at this moment. What's relevant is this person is an investigative reporter.
Well, then they have a duty to investigate. I mean, maybe there's a story there, maybe there isn't. But, Bruce, if you came to my office and you said to me, look, there's something going on here, I as an investigative reporter, have a duty to at least make some phone calls and find out or check into what you're telling me. Look up the case notes or something.
Unless, of course,
what
Frank.
happened is, in this case, and I've been told and to date over the last few years by many of the media, and that's what we're talking about here, when there's a filing, when the FBI says there's an indictment, that's when we could run the story. And my plea has been, wait a second. Individuals, children, families are being damaged on a daily basis. You know it. I know it. I've introduced the witnesses to you. I provided the evidence. And you stop. You stop. And you win your Grammy, you win an Emmy, and you win your Pulitzer for a job. I'm sorry. These news organizations are followers, and I must, and that's not why I'm here, is to tout the Independent Gazette and to give them all the credit. That's not the purpose. But I must say, in the 5 years that I've been doing this, Lou Jasikoff and staff and the Independent Gazette and Sanity Check Radio is the only organization that I know of that is proactive, that has a heart, that has compassion, and is doing their job.
Thank you for that, Bruce.
Well, Jesus, Bruce, thank you for that too. And the company was paramedical. And once again, you know, I asked her. I said, was this a conflict of interest? And it was, well, no, not really. And I got to tell you, Bruce and Michael and X and once again, Bruce, I know you're buried with stories too, and people are coming to you every day. And we talked on the way in here a little bit this morning, and getting texts and emails throughout the night, because people are feeling as though finally, with years and years and years of frustration, that finally maybe they'll have a voice. And that's all we're saying here to everybody today, folks that are listening, is that keep an open mind to this, because when we talked about lag towing, going back to that, it was nothing was happening. When you go back to custody for cash, Okay, not custody. Kids for cash. Nothing was happening.
Right. Well, the kids were bad, Lou. They deserved it.
Exactly, and the whole point. And Bruce, I'm glad you brought this up, is because I know for a fact that you have been not only on the front lines of this, but you've been trying to get this message out there. You've been to the FBI. You've been talking. We did an interview that we're going to post later on tonight. Or today, actually, it's ready to go, about a woman that asked us to come and tell her story. Tell her story. Here, think about this. She's going in for surgery. It was Thursday. Yeah, no, it was Wednesday. She asked us to come and videotape her story on Wednesday because she's going in for very serious surgery that she didn't know that she might come out of, and that surgery was canceled only because of complications. But it was for
it was spinal surgery.
It was spinal surgery that was caused by a very, very abusive husband. Broke her spine and the whole 9 yards. And listening to the whole story, but what happened with her, she's still trying to get her 2 kids back. One of the children complained that she was being sexually abused at 4 years old. 4 years old. And she brought those stories to the Blakely police. And I don't mind laying this out there, man. She brought it to the guardian ad litem, the admitted guardian ad litem that's going to be sentenced.
Correct. I know time is short. I have to add this. This is important. This feeling, and we know that the FBI is here. They're involved. They're investigating. It's coming out in Wilkes-Barre. We know they're in Luzerne, and they're in Lackawanna County. And I pray and hope, and word has it, that they are still investigating and looking into the wrongdoings and abuses in Lackawanna County Family Court. The word is, as of yesterday, is that it's almost as though the state attorney general, that the Lackawanna County DA that I'm in contact with, that the other agencies that are in town are saying, come to me, bring us more stuff. Now, that said, I've done that over 5 years. We've done that, and sometimes we get turned away. But I'm imploring, urging individuals that are listening, and you gentlemen right there, to continue to tell people that we must keep knocking on the door. We must keep knocking on the door. The time is right. The opportunity, the window of opportunity is here, and we must not give up. And thank you.
And Bruce, thanks for calling in today, and we'll be talking. Just to finish up that one story, here the woman has actually lost 2 of her kids to adoption, but the end of this story was that same individual, that the individual, the ex-husband that abused this woman so bad that she was afraid that she might not make it out of surgery, that same ex-husband who was accused of sexually abusing that 4-year-old, that same circumstance where this woman, and we hear this very often when they bring these charges that she was only doing it to get back at the husband, that ex-husband today is doing 50 to 100 years for raping her 11-year-old child. We'll be back.
The New Standard in Talk Radio. Saturday mornings, 94.3 FM, The Talker.
As we roll down this unfamiliar road, and although this wave is stringing us along, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home.
And this is your home, 94.3 FM, The Talker, Sanity Check, Libertarian Lou, Tea Party Mike. As we go down this unfamiliar road, I got to tell you, folks, this is your home. We want people to come forward and talk and know that you have a voice, and it's so very important. Michael, I have a couple announcements I need to make before we take some more phone calls. Certainly, we want to encourage people to check out the YAL, Young Americans for Liberty. Saturday, March 29th, is their state convention at Penn State University, 9 to 7 p.m. That we're sponsors of that. So certainly we encourage folks to go there. Also from the Factoryville Sportsman's Club, the NRA Friends of the NRA, the 22nd annual banquet is Saturday, March 29th, same day. And this is at Genetti's in Dixon City. You could touch base with the Factory Sportsman's Club. You'll get a little bit more information there. This past week, yesterday, in fact, we went and applied for permits to have a rally for judicial reform. That information will be going up shortly, April 26th, as soon as we have all our everything confirmed. We're going to certainly encourage people, but we want to start getting that out there so people will know that this very well could be a nationwide rally here, and using Northeast Pennsylvania as the fulcrum to put more light on what's happening to the family courts. Michael, we've said this before. It's almost like a perfect storm up here. Not only has our paper and this show and other shows talking more and more about what we're talking about, certainly with the Kids for Cash and the movie, folks are willing to listen and have an open mind to what's going on. And once again, just listening to some of the stories, and our time is always short here, that's all we're saying is keep an open mind. I do want to encourage people, before we take some more calls here, that our drive, our Indiegogo drive, is now open, and certainly we encourage folks to get involved with that. And you could go to any one of our news sources or certainly our websites. There'll be links up there. I don't know all the exact links, and our Muckraker News, which is going to be our national site, is up and rolling. I checked that out last night. Our T guy, John Manko, did a great job on that. I'm encouraged. We're going to be asking people from around the state and also around the country to provide us with content, and there'll be a place for them to have a voice on that also. Let's take a call from Ben, line 2. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, guys. Nice to talk with you again. This whole thing that you guys have been discussing now for quite some time involved in corruption, and you've talked about it mainly in the local area here. I'd like to talk about this whole circumstance surrounding our State Attorney General, Kathleen Kane, and her now refusal to prosecute these state legislators who openly took bribes, from what I understand, they have evidence that makes it pretty much an open and shut case, simply because they all turn out to be African American, and she's saying that the entire investigation was racially motivated, which is an absolute insult to those people who conducted that investigation. I can't think of anything worse that could be said about someone who works for the state in doing these things. I'd like to ask her if there was a gang war someplace and 4 or 5 people were killed, and after the investigation and the arrests were made, if they were all Latinos or African Americans or even Caucasian, would she refuse to prosecute those people because of that? And now she's hired a high-profile attorney, and he has instructed her not to answer any questions. We have a state attorney general who's refusing to answer questions around a case. It's unheard of.
Ben, you're absolutely right about that, and I can tell you that we have people on that too. We're looking at that. We're also looking more into the Penn State. Because of the custody for cash, there is a lot of crossover with some of the judges and some of the lawyers, and I'm encouraged because the information that's coming to us from knowledgeable people, lawyers and people that and other investigators. I had a call last night from, I would say, a high-profile attorney in the western part of the state. How can I help you? What can I do to help what you guys are doing? And it all comes down to the same thing, Ben. And thanks once again for your call. Thanks for listening every week, it seems. It seems like you're there with us every week. But certainly that's what's so important about not just what we're doing. We're going to force, Frank, going right back to what we started this show with. Regardless of what's happening, we're forcing other media to talk about stuff that maybe
otherwise wouldn't see the light of day.
otherwise would not see the light of day. Michael, as you know, we're not down to that close of a time, but I want to get you in today. You've been kind of we've had so many people coming in. Michael, what do you got to say?
Well, I think it's important. I don't want to overlook the fact that we have a media, the Independent Gazette, that people finally feel they can trust. And I think trust is always huge in any society. And we have been lacking that in media, not just in northeastern Pennsylvania, but throughout the nation. So I think this is where the real attraction is that true need to be trusted and that there's someone representing them. So, it's what motivates me, and I know what motivates you, Lou, and Frank, and X, and the rest of us, is to just get, along with truth comes trust, and we need to keep, though it's difficult, we need to keep going, and we need those folks who really believe in what we're doing to continue to trust us and to continue to support us.
And when you talk about that trust, and we played the song Brave, and I want to constantly get that out to folks, is that trust is real important to us. When somebody comes to us in trust and knowing that what they're telling us and they're truly, truly afraid of repercussions, we will guard that no matter what.
Right.
And X, we're running out of time. I want to give you a last minute or so, your final thoughts.
Yeah, let's just always check our bias. Again, I'll go back to the fact that if we're dealing with court systems, the integrity of our nation is based on the ability to effectively execute and prosecute laws in a fair and just manner. And obviously, what's going on in the court system today is something we really need to address.
X, we'll see you next week, and certainly throughout, I know you're still writing for Breitbart, you're writing for us. I wanted to give you a little plug in there. You're writing some great articles, I got to tell you. So we look forward to seeing them in the Gazette each month. Frank, your final.
My final thoughts is what we've seen so far with the public corruption. I just advise people not to be so trusting in our form of government, our police, that they wouldn't do that. The police wouldn't order a tow for a vehicle that could still be driven. The police wouldn't charge a minor with something that's frivolous, and a judge wouldn't just throw them in prison for 6 months to a year for something as minor as having possession of a cigarette. And certainly a judge or guardian ad litem wouldn't strip the rights away from a good parent who's doing their very best. So don't be too trusting, because we've seen far too often that those things did and are continuing to happen in our community. So if those things are happening, anything can happen.
And all your communities. And we need people to stay vigilant. And once again, know that as we grow, we're going to give as many people a voice as we possibly can.
Absolutely.
This is a long-term project. We never got into this, Michael, thinking it's going to happen overnight. And that's it, Michael. You got the last word, as always, my friend.
Hey, God bless all.
God bless everybody, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.